Welcome back to the Brother to Brother Show. I'm your host. We are talking about dating for marriage from a male's point of view, somebody who's serious about dating and relationships. We're going to get it started and we'll be back real soon. Welcome back to the Brother to Brother Show. I'm your host, K Mo, where we talk about relationships, mental health with men, and from a male's point of view and other men. So, as some of you all know, I run this channel and we have conversations with men. I just started my uh, fourth month up with the Iron Circle. We have conversation with men about men's health, what men go through, how to deal with certain situations in their personal relationships, professional relationships, and romantic relationships. And so much of this stuff comes from not just me, but from the men who I speak to on a regular basis. And I want to just shout them out, appreciate the support, and the women for listening to the content so they can kind of get a grasp on, what we are talking about. Because for so long, we haven't really heard it. I know it's a lot of stuff out right now that men are talking about, but they're not really. I think women are hearing it from a different space and they can't hear it because it might not be done in a way where you can hear to receive it. But this is for the people who want to receive it and who are willing and able and want to hear what men have to say, especially who are on that path for marriage. And then in this particular podcast, we're going to have two sessions. So the first one is just kind of intro, and it's to kind of hear what the brother has to say. And I'm bringing him on. I'm doing a reaction to a video that I did a few years ago, which is still relevant to this day. But what that looks like and how men are moving and what we should be looking for and what women need to do to get the men that they desire. So this is what this content is more so about. And so, the podcast that I spoke on was how do you know she's the one? And so that got a lot of traction. A lot of people listened to it. I got a lot of good feedback from it. So I wanted to bring it back so you can hear it, but also now in the dating for marriage content, and so that we can be on the same page and listen to what men really have to say. So we're gonna get it started right now. Hey Mo, and we're here today with the person. We're going right into our interview. Today we're talking about how do you know she's the one? Here we go. Okay, so talk to me a little bit about the work. You mentioned work, and a lot of times when people talk about work, and I'm gonna speak for myself too. Like I look at work like as being challenging, but I don't think work has to be challenging if it's a passion of yours, especially something you all are both working towards. But what's the misconception around work as opposed to, it being difficult?
To me, I see work as a shorthand of saying doing something together and individually that comes at a cost but has great reward. So that means the work means how are we spending time connecting with one another so that we're not passing by one another like two ships in the night. Work means if my financial habits are detrimental to our mutual financial goals, how do we talk so that my habits change? Because I am in submission to the larger goal. Let me say this. It was almost magical in a sense. I think it's just because of the work that we've invested in this relationship. Mm-hmm. When we laid out some goals, man, stuff just started falling into place. We laid out some financial goals. Boom, boom, boom. We laid out relational goals for how we would connect. Boom, boom, boom. So we laid out goals and we said, here is my commitment. Mm-hmm. And then my partner says, here's my commitment. And then we hold one another, not to a perception, or not to something we have in our head that we never said, but we mm-hmm. hold ourselves to something that we both articulate. Mm-hmm. And so we can, if you have this standard that you have articulated, then you can always return to something that you both agreed upon.
And so I think that's so important, right? So you're again, we're talking about dating towards marriage, and I know a lot of people who are married are like, how can this guy talk about this? But I bring people on who are either in the space of wanting to be married, and again, the guys, right? Because it's the misconception that a lot of women are ready for marriage, but having the skills and the techniques and the tools so that they can also understand the type of man that they're desiring, what this sounds like from that type of man. And so, it's beyond the feelings, right? It's the work that turns in dating into marriage. And so are guys, I think the misconception is because they're taking you out and things like that. That's the work. That is a part of the work, but are they also having standards? And a lot of times, I've even heard in my own personal life is, you have standards, you have higher standards than most men. I'm like, well, the standards that the guys have is just to show up, and or if they are articulating things about what they desire and what they're wanting, are you agreeing? And if you are agreeing, are you living up to the agreement? And so, because both people, as Parson mentioned, right, this is not a random person, this is a highly educated, known person, but I'll leave him as Parsons for now. But even what he's talking about is the example of putting together what you both desire and holding each other accountable. And when the accountability comes, it's not because I haven't told you, it's because we've also articulated and have a conversation, and now we have to live up to that. And that's where the dating transition into marriage looks like.
And that keeps you from feeling under assault.
Mm-hmm.
When I talk to men, especially, she says, all right, well, have you all talked about how
Mm-hmm.
you'll handle your money?
Yep.
Have you talked about how you want to raise your children? Mm-hmm. You talk about it, you agree on a standard, it's much better than stabbing in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like? So, but I think one of the things that you might not have said was that means that both people have to agree.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So we talk about finances, and in finances, my weakness, I have to be able to be okay with the person who has the strength in the finances to make that decision, or to make the goal, or whatever the case may be. And then we both say, this is what we're going to do. And then when I don't do it, because I'm not used to do it, I'm learning how to do it. I have to receive the feedback.
Well, and let me be honest.
And I don't know if that's what you're saying.
Yes, no, it's exactly. And let me be honest. I'm not always a fan of feedback.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason we both articulate it is so that I will be forced to be held accountable.
Right.
And
and I don't want to keep stopping, but you again, I think in society today, women are not willing, people are not okay with it, but the putting it out there up front, it's easier to have the conversation because now you're forced to look at it straight on. It's 10%, we'll get into it, but I think it's about 10% love and 90% work, because love can vanish, but the work has to always be there. And because you love somebody, this is the reason why you're doing it. And seeing that work as an investment rather than a burden, as Parson mentioned, it's key, because we all desire to not want to get feedback, not want to hear the truth and things of that nature. But if you're really a person that wants to invest in something, no matter what it is, if it's a relationship or not, it's always going to be an investment, because you get a return on your investment as you're doing these type of things before doing the dating stage, so that you can get to the marriage.
The problem is we have a culture that tells us we want people around us who will say the things we want to hear.
Yeah.
But relationships, you are surrounded by someone who loves you enough to tell you a truth that will move you towards your best self. That goes back to what I talked about, the deepening and the widening. I really think, what use is there to be in relationship with someone that does not help to deepen and widen?
One. She does all these other things. You're okay with those things, but there are a few things that she just can't receive. How do you go about addressing those things? Because I think oftentimes, and I've heard from my male friends, they will always say, I want to put a ring on it and I want to marry her, but this, but that. And it's that one thing that she may not be able to let go of. I have a situation where my friend says, I see her as my wife. I care about her. I love her. But because her father was not there, or the lack of, or he might have stepped out on the mother, she now talks down to her dad. And he's fearful of, if he does go that next step with her, he sees how she does talk to him. He's fearful of making that next move with her and talks to her about it, but there's no change.
I would say this, and let me be honest, there are buts. You will never eliminate all the buts.
Okay.
And I think that it would be a foolish notion to tell you that it is possible to eliminate. And believe you me, whoever you may be, dear listener, you may think of yourself as the best catch in the 21st century,
Yeah.
but there's some butts associated with you.
Yeah.
So the challenge is it a butt that you can live with?
Right.
Now,
for me, those 4 things that you mentioned earlier about the finances, communication, family, how you want to raise a family, things of that nature, I think that those to me are non-negotiables for me. Because I've heard and I've seen, just living this thing called life, if you can't communicate with the person effectively, and you all are always talking or whatever the case, but you're not able to communicate, how are you able to move forward? If you're living with somebody, you have to have finances. You have to know how this person is spending the money here, they're spending the money there, so that you all can have a living still moving forward. If you want to have a family and you don't ask those questions and have a family, and then you come up with those questions later on down the line that you might get, well, she this or he this. So I think those things, to me, I would suggest anybody, if you don't already model those things or have those things in your thought process before you think she's the one, you should have those things that she's the one. What do you think?
No, I think you're right.
Because a lot of we're talking to men here who don't know. Like you said years ago, and you have a model, and I'm sure they've given you a lot of information. Just like I felt like I had a strong enough foundation. I only found that out maybe 5 or 6 years ago, honestly.
So we had a conversation about the things that guys are well for a marriage, right? And so he goes into communication, family, finances. I think I said community already, but it's about 5 things that you should look for and have prior to even getting into a relationship. And you should know these foundational things, and you should be having these conversations prior to marriage, even into the dating stages. Like the first 1 or 2 things. Hey, do you even want to be married? Hey, how do you think about finances? Hey, what do you think about communication? Hey, what does your family look like later on? Again, we talked to men about that, so men can kind of understand. I think this is 5 years ago. A lot of men now have an idea or are standing on their standards, may not are able to articulate fully, but because men are now having standards, it's kind of a backfiring thing with women because they're not used to it. Even though they've asked for it, they want to know, they want you to effectively communicate. They want you to be, mentally and physically aware, but that awareness comes with a lot of truth and understanding about yourself. And because a lot of men are speaking about it now, our fathers, grandfathers did not say too much about it because things were different. Now that they are, the common thing that we're seeing is people are not able to hear it. Going back to what he said about 2 minutes ago, you're putting this foundation down. You're saying this is what you're going to do as a standard. You're moving forward. And then when you have to stand in it and articulate why you didn't do X, Y, and Z, even though you heard the other person, that's where the difficulty comes in and we're having issues. But again, we want to get to this point. You have to do a lot of self-development, understanding, practice, and be ready to receive it, because you're going to receive it if you're not able to, if you haven't been in this place for a while. You're going to, you need to be ready to hear the truth when you haven't heard it your whole life. If you're not able to do that, then the moving to the marriage piece, I think it will be even harder. I see it. I hear men on my Iron Circle calls talk about they didn't do in their first marriage or in a marriage that they're in right now, and how hard it is to get to that point. Luckily, they have the type of woman that is finally matriculating to that place. But in this day and age where the women empowerment and a lot of things are being said, and they're not okay with how men are saying stuff or even expressing how they feel, it's becoming a problem. We've seen this all over social media, but I'm just bringing this awareness because, you know, the guys have heard some of this, but we're wanting us to get together and be together too.
If I was honest with myself and understand now what relation, because I always heard communication is key, but I didn't know what that meant. So what do you think about those 4 or 5 things?
Well, again, when I talk with people, faith, family, finances, sex, sexuality, communication, those are bedrock. And I think that, you know, it will not work to interview someone around those things because, as you know, you can say anything in an interview,
right?
But you watch. So you should spend time with that person, with their family. They should spend time with you and your family, especially if you're looking to a long-term partnership marriage, right? You should be able to talk about, and here's a big glaring light. If there's any one of these things that people refuse to talk about, that's a sign. That doesn't mean it's impossible. Partnership, unless you can agree on what healthy, joyful sex looks like for you and for your partner.
Right.
And listen to me when I tell you, don't leave that ish to chance.
Right.
It's too important.
Right.
So don't leave any of that to chance. You got to talk with one another. And you know, another thing that I thought about a lot, Kay, is you have to have, the reason I talk about family and friends in that larger context of the issues that are very, very important, is that you have to have a community that makes your marriage possible.
I thought I had a lot. I haven't heard that before. That's
you have to. So if you two are married,
and again, this is he's going to get into it, but one of the things that I've seen is even in my friend group myself, it's dropped down to a certain level. Doesn't mean I don't talk to them at all and write them off, but the people I decide to choose to be with in certain aspects of my life, that community is so rich, so important. I would like for it to be 12 people, honestly, but it's really only 4 or 5 at times. And so I think him going into this person to talk about how you need, and I've heard other guys talk about this. There was a gentleman, I can't remember his name, so don't bash me for this, but he talked about him and his wife or his fiance, and his fiance goes into how, you know, the man goes into, who do you go to when there's an issue or problem? And she said she named all her friends, she named her family members, and you know, he did do the same thing, went to his father, brother, I think that was it. And he said, well, whose side are they on? And he mentioned that the side that they're on, it's like it's your friends and people that you recognize that who you go to, and then my brother and my father always take your side and nobody takes mine. That's not a fair fight. That's not a fair community. And I only say that because it doesn't mean that either one of you are wrong or any all it. But the point was the fact that there's nobody taking the man's side like her friends are taking a man's side. His family, his God, the men in his life were able to say, well, look at it from this point of view. Her family was not looking at it from his point of view. It was a lot of imbalance, but the community that they have around them, or the community that Parsons is about to talk about, is fair. They can see both sides. They're married. They have people around them that are, nurture marriage, nurture being in a relationship, nurture partnership. It's not a individual, single, live my best life kind of personality. It's a more so, hey, we want things to work, and you putting people around you who desire that and cannot look objectively, not just in their personal life, but also look at how people move who are in healthy relationships.
In partnership, but all of your friends have lives that negate partnership.
Right.
Your partnership will suffer.
Why do you feel that's true?
Well, because marriage is not about two individuals so much as it is about a larger communal reality around relationships, around what is important and how humans ought to be in relationship one with another. So the reason that divorce rates are higher now than they were 100 years ago is 100 years ago, the community had certain values and expectations, and they did everything they could to keep people together. Sometimes, let's be honest, sometimes it may not have been the healthiest thing,
right?
But there were communities that made it possible. I look at the divorce rates just anecdotally in my own family, from my parents' generation to my generation, it at least doubled. Right. So, there is something to learn there about what possible ingredients were missing that might have made marriages that should have flourished, that might have helped them to flourish. All marriages won't flourish, but because I think that, again, there is language that I learned years ago. It is mutual self-giving and sacrifice, but it has to be mutual. If one partner feels like they're doing all the giving and all the sacrifice, that won't be able to stand.
Yeah, two more. That's interesting because, again, we're talking about, is she the one, or how do you know she's the one? And as I'm thinking about some of the things you're talking about, even when you discussed, what did you just say about the mutual sacrifice?
Right. Mutual giving, mutual sacrifice.
Right. And I would say that I've heard, even when I'm looking at that person for the next level of my life, what if you feel like you're doing, they feel like they're doing more, you feel like you're doing more? How do you have a conversation around it?
I think then at that point, you both have to stop protecting yourself and be vulnerable, because both of those things can't be true. And vulnerability is very, very difficult. I have to admit that I still struggle with what it means to be vulnerable. That means that we both have to say, okay, we love each other. Let's pull down the facade. Let me show you my wounds and let me see yours, and we can trust each other.
Now I've heard this too. So is that the responsibility of the man, or is that responsibility of the woman? Because I find that if it's always one person being the one that has the courage, because I think that takes a lot of courage to say what we are going to do, what we need to do. That takes a lot of energy as well. So how does that look?
I would say that it is not gendered. I would be hesitant to say it's the man or the woman's responsibility. I think it is, the scripture says, submit yourselves to one another. There has to be mutual submission, mutual giving, mutual sacrifice. And, you mentioned a topic around listening. I think that we have to listen deeply to ourselves and deeply to our partners. And a lot of that with which we struggle can be resolved with real listening. I have to admit, I don't listen as I ought. And I have a very patient partner who's trying to help me do better with that.
Okay.
But listening covers a multitude of sins, sins of omission and sins of commission.
So again, we want to talk to our people and young men about it. How do you know that she's the one? So I would, as we're kind of wrapping things up, and we're going to, finish with how we really feel about the conversation around is she the one? But thinking about,
unfortunately, I'm going to stop right there. I want to recap what we both said, and then we're going to check out the second session after this. But building marriage blueprint during dating. And so, you know, the people that I know who are married, who are comfortably married, who I would say have healthy or somewhat good relationships, I don't think they made it work, right? But people who I know who are trying to be in, or women who I know who are trying to be in those situations, they may not have found that person at a certain age, and now they're trying to, because they focus on education and themselves so much, maybe struggling in the dating market, because the dating market is few and far between who are the guys who are serious. But I would say the guys who are serious have some great things that they're looking for and standards now, right? And so that's different. Even on a panel that I mentioned in my last podcast, a panel of women discussing and asking questions about what men want and what they desire, and also with them, they had a tough time kind of hearing it, because they're still thinking about the man from 10 years ago, when 10 years ago they were 30. You know, that man that's now 40 and you're 40 is a different type of man now. He has standards. He has things that you may not be used to hearing. And those are great things that he wants. And you want to, unfortunately, within your matriculation of work of may not be even being in a relationship or having situationships, or, you know, dating, you may not be hearing that man, because that man that you desire, or the man that you are entertaining at the time, he may not have those standards because he's not serious. He's not looking for anything. We're only talking about men who are desire that type of thing. So financial habits, communication style, faith practices, family, putting yourself in spaces where you actually can meet their family, not just talking about finances, but also mutually doing things with finances, not maybe big lump sums, but seeing what that looks like, having those type of conversations. Because I even also think the guys who spend a lot of money on women, if they're out of that situation and they're gone, and a woman doesn't know financially what's going on, I've seen even some of my friends or people I've heard of, the women be at loss because the finances aren't together. The finances aren't talked about. You know, all these are things that, you know, Parson mentioned, and I 100% agree in. And this is 5 years ago that I was, even myself, learned a lot. You know, they are all need to show up before marriage, before you get married. And the ones I know for sure that don't, they are struggling. They are not connected. So those are the biggest talking points for, you know, dating, and, you know, at least moving into that transition into dating for marriage, that I wanted to at least talk about on this podcast. And I want to see you back on the next one, so we can finish up and wrap up this conversation. So until next time, we love you. We'll see you again.